Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime series with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. Today on the Lunchtime Coaching segment, we are chatting to the co-founder and chief executive officer of CCI Professionals, the Human and Capital Investment and Leadership Development Consulting House, Dr. Marcel Hattingh. Dr. Marcel, thank you for joining me.
Kevin, thank you very much. And to all our listeners also this afternoon, I appreciate the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks for making some time. Don't you want to sort of just tell us more about who you are and more about what you do?
Thank you for that. That's a long discussion, so I'll try and be brief. Let me perhaps share three things personally. Happily married, staying in Pretoria in South Africa. My kids also are busy growing through the ranks of primary school. So obviously this COVID season is causing a lot of interesting challenges for us. But from that note, on a more professional level, I've had the opportunity of being in the field of leadership development for close to about 20 years, where there were various expressions from the non-profit world, ranging right through to all the full-profit side, and even with a foot perhaps in the more academic world also. So that's always been a privilege for me to make sure we have a holistic understanding of what's going on. Perhaps from an academic point of view, had the privilege of doing my PhD in organizational leadership in the USA, where I specialized, amongst other things, in sustainable leadership, ranging from an understanding of capital growth right through to succession planning and other related areas also within that. So I think that's in a nutshell just who I am. Really passionate about people, really passionate about sustainable leadership, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me as well. You know, when I first read about you, and that's why I wanted to get in touch with you. You know, it's something I'm very passionate about, and being people, leadership, coaching. So yeah, it's right up my alley, and I was like, there's definitely a good conversation that's waiting to happen right there.
Wonderful.
Today, we when you shared some information, you gave us 3 areas of discussion, and we're going to be touching on some of those points today. Don't you want to speak to us about those 3 areas and sort of preface what you're going to be sharing with us today?
Thank you, Kevin. So obviously, as a consultant, we are fairly close to the ear of what we call either the business owners or then the custodians of a company, whether that's your C-suite individuals or whether it's then, the business owner themselves, the shareholders of the company. And since the lockdown started, it seems that there's been a rapid acceleration in some of the areas that we most probably preempted that's busy changing in the season, as a result perhaps of the fourth industrial revolution, or if you look towards the human environment, the VUCA effect, or people talk about moonshot projects. But then also there's an environment, especially in South Africa, where there's a lot of challenges, instability on political realms, the social economic challenges we have in our country. And it seems that we're finding ourselves right now in the middle of the pandemic, just in a perfect storm. So I remember, it's literally almost a year ago that we went into our first hard lockdown. And how many CEOs that we are connected with phoned me or WhatsApped me and said, Marcel, what are we going to do? Am I going to lose half of my C-suite managers in the next month? Is everybody going to die? And obviously that chaotic franticness has now settled down. And fortunately, we didn't lose that many people as a result of it. But it seems that the whole pandemic has most probably accelerated all of these changes between something like 3 to 5 years, which we would have in any case embraced if the pandemic didn't happen. Just a very simple explanation. A year ago, I spoke to certain tech companies that were clients of ours, and they said, Marcel, we are not geared to have development and consulting in an online space. Our people is literally not yet there. Well, 1 year later, and everybody is so comfortable to do it via a Zoom platform or a Teams or whatever platform you might be using. So we're seeing a lot of online adoption. But the challenge that most people are struggling with is, how is this impacting the well-being and the engagement of our staff and our people? And this is really the field that I'm very interested in, where we look at the human capital component of an organization and how do we maximize that investment. So given from 3 different angles, what's really on my heart is, first of all, how do we deal with all of these changes within the context of, let's call it the fourth industrial revolution, or then in COVID, or any of the other contributors to this perfect storm. Second point is specifically pertaining to sustainable leadership. How do we grow sustainable leadership? How do we grow enduring companies when everything seems very turbulent and chaotic right now? But thirdly is not to forget the human element. When we talk about personal resilience, personal agility, neuro health, life audit, again, there's many different phrases we can connect to that, but it boils down in the end to the individuals also that's connected with a specific company. How do we take care and not just sustain, but obviously accelerate the well-being of our people and their engagement? So I think that's the three topics that we will briefly explore today. And I'm really looking forward just to unpack some of these things, both from perhaps a more theoretical, but definitely also a practical point of view. What can our listeners do to create more sustainable environments in this time?
So, I mean, the first question that comes to mind, as you prefaced, when we're speaking to the human capital within an Industry 4 enabled world,
yes,
why is this important for us to really start focusing on the human capital? What do you think businesses are not realizing about this?
Kevin, to be very honest, the more I delve into this area, the more I come to the realization that I always want to put it from a market position perspective. It seems that we have actually very little competition. Let me quickly unpack that for a moment, what I mean by that. We find a lot of management consultants. That's not the field we're in. We find a lot of human resource consultants. Again, that's not the field we're in. We find a lot of people who are advisors out of personal experience or whatever. Again, not the field we're in. It seems that there are very few people that understand how to optimally invest in human capital. So to unpack that, what I mean by that, first of all, you need to have a thorough understanding of the capital pools that makes up an organization, whether it's your monetary or working capital, whether it's perhaps product capital or service capital, whether it's natural capital, if you're perhaps in the area of mining or, you're looking after natural gas or oil deposits. But all organizations universally have got some segment that belongs to their human capital. And currently, it seems there's a great awakening happening around the world where people are asking this question, whether it's due to the rise of the social enterprise, as the Lloyds call it, or the ecocentric organization, another buzzword we find in the industry this time. But how do I, first of all, monetize or determine the value of my human capital component? Research shows that it's up to about 35% of your overall capital might belong to that pool. But second of all, how do I create a thorough investment strategy behind my human capital component to move that forward to support the outcome of the overall capital growth of a company? And it seems that very few people, even people that's in an executive environment, really understand how to answer those questions. And that's really where our expertise comes into play. Is that making sense, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. From everything you're speaking to is, I think that's from a business perspective on where I also have a lot of impact is really around the human-centric sort of environment and really gauging people on that space. And like now that and I think to your point where COVID has really pushed a new agenda almost, where people are actually asking bigger questions, and whether they want to be in this environment, whether they want to be in this business, whether the strategy of their businesses have been working in the last 10 years. There's a whole new agenda that people are really starting to question, and that brings me to sustainable leadership. So just to for the audience out there, so just to give us a bit of an indicator of what is sustainable leadership, and how do we incorporate that into succession by reproduction, as you mentioned?
Yes. And this is really an area where I feel if we understand the definition of sustainability, it's going to have a huge impact also on how we approach the human capital area. It would have been very nice if we could have had an inscription in our balance sheet of the company that says, well, this is your human capital component, or we do a lot of merger and acquisition support from the human capital integration. And when you look towards the due diligence, it's very seldom that that's actually quantified. And the reason for that is it's a different domain altogether than what your monetary capital would most probably be belong to. So we have a small little model, we call it the 4 S's, that helps us also when we speak towards our clients and C-suite leaders to understand at what level are we talking about. Because S1, and a lot of our clients or even people in our entrepreneurial incubator, another company called the Foundry, would be in what we call either startup position, or people are just stuck. We see a lot of people are just stuck, don't know how to respond to the challenges in the season. Or number 3, they just in survival mode. Man, the cash flow is just completely bust. Our income statements is not working at all. And that's really S1. So it's either startup, stuck, or survival. The first thing we need to do is move into S2, which we call success. And success, whether it's personal or for the organization, if we look towards Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's really those fundamental life-sustaining questions. And we call that the economic engine. People even like Jim Collins years ago in his famous publication, Good to Great, spoke about that hedgehog concept, that how do I ensure that my economic engine is okay? And currently a lot of economic engines are under strain because of current reality. Now, a lot of time it's the success block that we translate towards our capital. And that's really a good point of view, but it's not a complete point of view. Because people want to jump from S2 all the way to S4, which is sustainability. The thinking behind it, because I have a sustainable economic model, now my company, my organization will also become sustainable. The research shows us that's not the truth at all. Most companies struggle even to the 3rd generation of leadership. Never mind, it's only about 2 to 3% of companies that really transition into the 4th generation. So as part of my study field, which I did both academic and also within our organization, I am absolutely crazy to study organizations that's at least 100 years old and then moving into, well, I know of a company that's close to 1,000 years old in the medical industry. They trace their ancestry all the way to 1021. They're not 100% sure, but that's kind of the thought where the first guys in Britain started with the idea of this specific company. But what were the building factors? What were the elements that they built into that company to really get that level of sustainability? And that's the missing ingredient of S3. When we move out of success, we first need to move to significance. How does the organization become a significant contributor towards the welfare of society, towards the impact of society, towards the transformation of the environment in which they are? Because ultimately, people don't just buy into your success of your economic model. People want to buy into your significance factor and transition that company into S4, sustainability. That's where we see the magic happening. I'm trusting that's making sense.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. I love that you have a 4-step process to it, because I've recently done some training with a very large insurance company, and when you speak to it this way, part of the struggle that they're having is literally the significant factor.
Yes.
They're because they're a large institution, they kind of go, okay, well, we've been around for so many years, we've had great success, but the question is, okay, cool, that's fantastic that you are, but what happens now, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and what is the approach? And I think that's what's COVID has really pushed that button for a lot of organizations to really start questioning the sustainability factor, right? But on the I was looking at sustainable leadership and came across a website called the ASCD.org, speaking about the 7 principles to sustainable leadership. And one of the things they mention is sustainable leadership should be resourceful. Where they speak about systems providing intrinsic rewards and extrinsic incentives that attract and retain the best and brightest of the leadership pool. Why is this also a factor? Why should sustainable leadership be a part of the resourceful approach when they're looking at this?
Yes. Let me give you one case study that we did during the last couple of years. So when you go towards the world of creating succession planning or sustainability, then the general model, and there's obviously different models that people are utilizing, is what we call succession by appointment. it basically boils down to the fact the CEO somewhere comes to the conclusion, or any other position, I need to retire. They notify perhaps the board, or they notify the human resource department, and then everybody frantically starts running around because we're going to lose our CEO in 12 to 18 months. And it boils down that the replacement person needs to have the right skill set and perhaps the right experience. A very limited view of appointing a new person only based on skills, because the skill set in any case changes rapidly, especially in a time like this. The research that we then did, where we looked at successful handovers, where the entire, how can I say, the DNA, the values, the culture, more than just the skill set remain in place, is a process that we then call succession by reproduction. These organizations placed a huge emphasis that their own leadership development was about 75% internally, and about 25% was new blood, new fresh DNA from the outside, where most companies did it the opposite way around, did it succession by appointment. 25%, they got it right to grow and develop their own leaders internally through their own resources. 75%, the whole time they rented in a certain sense, from outside. And we see those models are not sustainable in the long run. People just jump for a good paycheck or for a good working environment, but the moment there's another offer outside, they will easily jump ship towards another organization. Where if you take the time and you have a learning culture or a developmental culture within the organization, and the vast majority of our leaders grow through the ranks, we have this expression we call raising our own sons and daughters of this family or the specific organization internally, chances that they will remain loyal and remain with the company is so much greater than just getting lifeblood from external. And that's where we want to channel our resources to make sure that we have healthy internal incubation processes and resources internally to grow and develop those individuals.
And hence why cultivating leadership within is such an important factor, right?
Definitely, yes.
So one of the other points that I thought would be interesting in mentioning about sustainable leadership is promoting diversity.
Yes.
Now, very often you hear this as a crutch word or a tick box exercise, but speak to us in terms of just your insights and why is diversity and the consideration of it so important when thinking on sustainable leadership?
Yep. Again, Kevin, I want to take it back to our 4S model to say, if you don't answer that question from S3, the significance factor, you're going to run into serious challenges. And we see that with the entire movement of whether it's BEE or previously disadvantaged, whatever word you want to connect with that. Let me give you one big case study that I was involved in for the last 4 years. So this is a large company within the consulting engineering space, proudly South African. The previous CEO had a very specific vision to move this company to a place of true sustainability. The company was already very successful, so all the boxes were ticked in S2. And then he said, guys, to bring in a significance factor and a diversity factor, and he used the example, we can't just have this good vehicle and put it like a roof rack on top. We need to change the very nature of the company to say that social economic development and inclusivity and all of that becomes the core, and our work within the engineering world is but a tool in the toolbox. And everybody originally thought, man, this is a great idea, let's do it. And Exco gave him a go-ahead, the board gave him a go-ahead, and then they started venturing down this pathway around about 2016, 17, 18. But then all of a sudden, the people started realizing, but hang on a minute, with all the changes happening, this is now eating away on some of our shareholder value initially. Our dividends and everything else, the bonuses, or whether it would be salary increases, suddenly S2 is taking a bit of strain because we're putting emphasis on S3. The success is no longer going to my back pocket. The success is now all of a sudden moving towards the significance factor. And that caused a lot of turbulence and a lot of challenges, where we had especially a bunch of older people sitting around the Exco and the shareholder table and said, but hang on a minute, I'm not up for this. I don't want to put my own income under challenge. Now, given to put this into perspective, these guys were earning significant amount of money. This was not putting strain on their day-to-day living. This was really putting perhaps a bit of a challenge on really, really affluent, high-net individuals. In the end, unfortunately, that case study turned out to be so negative that the CEO decided he's going to resign, he's not going to fight this thing through. The company reverted back to just the S2 focus, just their own sustainability. And unfortunately, in the last 2 years, the shareholder value has significantly decreased, whether it's now infrastructure development in South Africa or whatever you want to blame as the cause for that. But there was a challenge that the custodians of that company didn't fully grasp the implication that building success alone is not going to bring you to that sustainability. We must take some of our resources, we must take some of our income streams and intentionally invest it in a greater significance factor. And if we're willing to do that, and we say inclusivity or diversity is one of the components that we specifically want to address, being a significance-driven company, that will bring us to the place of ultimately creating a sustainable organization. For me, there's no two ways about that. We need to think larger than just our own back pockets and our own company. We need to think about the impact we're having. We have got this little saying, if your company have to disappear overnight for whatever reason, will your community, will your tribe, will your environment miss your company? Or will everybody just say, hey, hang on a moment, CCI Professional is gone, but who cares? That's not the kind of impact we want to have. If CCI Professional have to disappear, everybody in our community need to ask the question, what happened to them? Where are these guys? We're missing the impact that they made within our community. That's true inclusivity and diversity for us.
Yeah, it's almost, just listening to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, it's almost that your sustainability model needs the foundation of significance.
Yes.
Because that in itself will be the sustainability of the future of that business.
If we talk a little bit theory in a moment. So I saw the other day, even Simon Sinek, who became very popular in the last year or two with his Start with the Why, he's got another one of these video clips that he propagates the idea that businesses do not exist to make money. Now, obviously, from a classical MBA textbook, that is a horrific statement to make, because we were all taught that you have a full profit company, a PTY in the South African context, to make money. Well, for me personally, for many years, I've already shifted out of that position to say, yes, there are perhaps some companies that exist purely for the sake of making money. And that's fine. If that's the reason why you created the company in the first place, please, by all means, do that. But most companies, the moment we start talking about what is the creation purpose, what is the reason you have the company, comes to the conclusion that profitability is only an enabler to get to a certain outcome. Yes, we need to measure our enablers. Yes, we need to grow our enablers. Yes, we need to make a lot of profit. But ultimately, it's not about the profit. It is about the reason we created the company in the first place. And to unpack that, perhaps just in a line or two, if you had to ask me, Marcel, well, why do we have organizations? Whether it's a business, a charity, a school, a university, a church, any organization, my personal definition would be as simple as an organization is a vehicle to address a need in society. We as founders of companies see there's a need in society. We start an organization to go and address that need. Everything else that we do around that is but enablers to ultimately address that need. Hence, we need good profitability, but it's not about the profitability. It's about the need in society we're trying to address. And that's the significance factor. That's not the success factor. But if I don't have success and my economic engine dries up, I can't impact the significance factor that I'm ultimately trying to achieve. Kevin, is that making sense?
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly the point, right? And I love that you break it down so wonderfully. In terms of just covering the last point of today's overview of discussion,
yes,
you mentioned personal resilience and emotional agility during this transition season of the COVID pandemic.
Indeed.
So talk to us more about personal resilience. It's a conversation I love having, and there's so much that people don't realize about this. But from your perspective, please tell us more about what personal resilience is.
Yes. Let me use, again, a metaphor to describe it. So a couple of years ago, I was training at the University of Stellenbosch, and one of the directors of their various departments was in the training room when we spoke about personal resilience. And I explained to them that this is really a function of neurology, or if I don't want to use that strong word, let me call it a function of psychology or emotions. And then the specific director put up his hand. He said, Marcel, I've been in the professional sport arena for many years. Actually, this individual was on his way to the Olympic Games. I think it was the years of Ilana Meyer, and whether that was the Barcelona one, I can't remember the exact year. But he was also running the 10,000 meters. And he said, Marcel, for us as professional athletes, we use the same concept. It's never an issue of undertraining for us, those professional athletes. It's always an issue of overtraining, that we do one too many runs, one too many exercises, and we actually get injured. And they call it, I have a burnout. I have a physical burnout because of overtraining. When we talk about personal resilience and emotional agility, we talk about exactly the same thing. It's just not a physical thing, but it's a neurological or emotional thing. Because of all the strain I'm busy taking, it's not just my work, hopefully not my private life, but everything happening around me, my emotional capacity to deal with all of this is just taking one too many shots. It's another layoff. It's another financial discrepancy. It's another challenging environment with a client. And I feel I just can't handle this. And you start moving down this very slippery slope of burnout. And obviously, there's a lot of signs. There's a lot of things that we can pick up when people are moving towards that way. Even the World Health Organization, if memory serves correct, it was August 2019, categorized personal burnout within the medical classifications, no longer just as a psychosomatic symptom, but really a medical condition that we can diagnose and pick up on it. So from my point of view, what exactly is it? It's a two-sided coin. One side of the coin deals with my endurance factor. And when I say that, I always remember the movie, I think it was the Rocky Balboa movie with Sylvester Stallone. I don't know, there was like 300 of those movies or whatever. But in one of those many iterations they did, Rocky is having this chat with his boy, and he tells him, listen, my son, it's not how many hits you can take. It's not how many hits you can give. It's how many hits you can take and keep on moving forward. That's the endurance side. When all of this happens to us in life, how many shots can you take and keep on moving forward? But the other side, to keep to the boxing arena, he was the world heavyweight champion. It was also the fact that sooner or later you will get knocked down. That's inevitable if you climb into the boxing arena. And when you get knocked down, the question is, do you have the ability to get back up? That's that bounce back ability. And that's the other side of the coin. Yes, I can take the shot, endurance, but even when I get knocked down, I can get up and move forward. And then there's the last component to say also, well, if we stick to the boxing metaphor, it takes wisdom to know when do we quit. Because resilience is also not the bull terrier that is bitten into something and just keeps on going. When I get into the boxing arena and a Mike Tyson is standing opposite to me, I know I'm going to get clobbered. This is not going to be healthy. I'm going to die. I can't face an opponent like that. So my resilience also tells me what is healthy to quit and not keep on going. So when we talk about personal resilience, it's really both sides of the coin, and to understand when do we need to throw in the towel and say, this is no longer a healthy venture to be. And that obviously, Kevin, is unique for every individual, because every function of neurology for every person is an entirely different and a unique conversation.
Yeah. So as you're speaking, one of the things that occurs to me is, what do you do in a case where this is part of it's part of the sustainability and part of recognizing the human capital and the importance of that. But what do you do, and how do you handle a situation where leaders in the world are saying, well, this emotional stuff is not something they want to deal with, or what do you do in that case?
Let me use two metaphors. So people used to call it the soft skills versus the hard skills. Yeah. And then it sounds like all these emotional things. Well, let me change that metaphor just a little bit to say, let's talk about your PC that's in front of both of us. You have hardware and software. You can buy the best hardware PC, 30, 40,000 Rand, switch it on, but you don't have any software on it, and see how useful that computer will be. You see, hardware and software is not the one as fluffy and all cuddly, and the other one is really what makes things work. Now, to run your PC, you need both upgrades in software and hardware continuously. But as you and I know, my hardware is fine for 2 to 3 years, but every 3 to 4 months, I actually upgrade the software, which from my point of view would say, you teach certain technical skills. Let's say, for instance, you're a chartered accountant. Once a year or twice, I'll do some hardware updates in the latest models and methods. But my software update to be a successful chartered accountant is actually something I need to do on a much more regular basis, or you're going to start running out of good, healthy, up-to-date programs. You see the same for your cell phone, for instance. That's the one metaphor. The other one, let's talk bottom line finance. So that's the thing. People tell me, Marcel, I'm going to invest all of this money, but what is it going to impact my bottom line? I said, sir, ma'am, it's going to significantly impact your bottom line. Let's take Discovery Health as a case study. Discovery has figured out as a publicly listed company long time ago that to do preventative care for their people versus restorative care. What's the difference? Restorative care, I fall sick, I go to the doctor, and they need to pay the doctor's bill from my medical fund. That is an expensive exercise. For them, it makes much more sense to buy or to pay my gym fees, to pay my Kalula fares. I'm getting my Kauai smoothies. I'm using my my Discovery miles. They pay my running shoes. We can go through all of those things, and we say, how do they actually make money throwing money at that? But they know that I'm a, I don't know, what's it, diamond status or, the highest status member. The amount of time that I actually will go and see the doctor, who's really expensive, is a much better financial model rather to keep me healthy than to pay the medical bills.
Yeah.
Once the leadership of a company has adopted a similar pattern to say, we would rather invest in preventative care, preventative resilience, preventative emotional agility, etc., than sitting with an employee group who's falling apart, they have no resilience, they can't engage. To restore that, it's going to take a lot of bottom line profitability. But if we keep our people humming, engaged, healthy, the effect on that, on productivity, your performance mastery, and all of that is a much more profitable venture. And if it wasn't the truth, a public listed company who lives for paying dividends to their shareholders would not have made a move like that. And we've seen, in any case, the other public healthcare services following in exactly the same trends like that. So yes, it's got an enormous effect on the bottom line of a company, your profitability. And yes, it's got a huge effect just on the humanity and the humane approach that we have towards our people. They're not just a resource to a machine that we can use and unfortunately sometimes abuse. They are part of the very capital wealth that makes that organization who they are.
I love that. Guys, if you just joined us, we're talking to Dr. Marcel Hattingh, sustainable leadership, human capital, and personal resilience and emotional agility. So, Dr. Marcel, if you could leave us with a bit of tips for the listeners out there,
yes,
just in consideration of these three topics, what would that be? Because I think and I definitely invite you back to really come hash out these topics, because I'm fascinated and I just love the way you put all this information together. But leaving us with tips, what would that be?
Okay, so let's do one tip on each one of the topics. First one, when we talk about sustainable leadership, I am very much of the opinion that we should never stop growing. So if you come through the ranks of perhaps a more technical field and you feel, yes, this is fluffy, this is difficult, I would really recommend upskilling yourself. It's never been so easy to learn or to get great information off the internet or following eBiz Radio or following any other pathway of people that's really, really delving into these topics. So I would just put it out there. If you feel uncomfortable or unsure, make an investment and upskill yourself in what exactly is sustainable leadership and how do we create sustainable organizations.
Yeah.
Okay. The second topic that connects very close with that, the changes we're seeing in the world, whether it's Industry 4 or creating, just making sense out of all of this, guys, follow people like the World Economic Forum. Read up on it. Again, look at what are the changes happening in the marketplace. But then also go and get yourself a good coach or a good mentor. There are people that specializes in this field. I'm not just talking about general business skills. I'm talking about people who would most probably call themselves futurists, I'm not talking about the space cadets, people that's trying to guess what's going to happen. I'm talking about a serious business or a consultant coaching person that understand the changes in the marketplace and how that move forward. But given perhaps the greatest aspect, and that boils down again for me to the individuals. As leaders, I believe we are custodians to the well-being also of the people who's been entrusted to us to work alongside us and who's working in our companies. For us as custodians, we need to create an environment that's safe, an environment that's productive, an environment that's resourced in order that our people can actually live out these callings and these abilities that they bring to the table. If you see your people are taking a bit of strain, one element that I can recommend, you are welcome to go to either the Facebook page, say, of CCI Professional, or the LinkedIn profile, just two social media platforms. And you need to scroll a little bit back to about this time last year. So we released 35 slides, literally each day for the hard lockdown period, where in these slides, we recommended one small little practical thing that you can do on a day-to-day basis to increase your resilience ability. Look, out of those 35 slides, there's most probably 5 to 10 slides that will talk to me. And that's the great thing, because every person is unique and every person has got a unique approach to resilience. So most probably about 25 slides is not going to have an impact on my life, but I want to guarantee you, out of those 35 slides, something's going to talk to you, something's going to talk to your colleagues, and you can just take those ideas, practical. What can I do? 20 to 15 minutes a day, implement it. You don't even need to do it every day. 3 to 4 days a week is more than enough, but it's going to help you to move forward. And obviously, then there's more professional things like the shadow match system that we use to pick up on those kind of things. But I think just as a start, some practical things is going to help you already to build your resilience going forward.
Fantastic. Guys, it's Dr. Marcel Hattingh, co-founder and chief executive officer of CCI Professionals, and all the links and descriptions and where you can find out more will be in the description boxes below. Dr. Marcel, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for spending some time with us and sharing some insights.
Great, Kevin. Thank you so much. And to all our listeners also, it's really a privilege. It's a phenomenal season. I know it's daunting for a lot of people, but the opportunities that's been presented to us in a season such as this is absolutely just phenomenal. So all the best to our listeners. And if there's any way in which we can support more personally, anybody is also welcome to make in contact with me personally through Facebook, LinkedIn, our company website. Our contact details are available on that also.
Fantastic. And all of that will be shared, as mentioned. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's Lunchtime Coaching segment happening every other day on ebizradio.com. And that happens every day at 12 o'clock.